Good morning and welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. It is Thursday, June 2nd, 2022. Race and justice and injustice, health and well-being, environmental and climate justice, an economy gone wrong, police brutality and voting rights are all that is plaguing Black America. Still, for many activists and those who continue to fight for freedom, justice, and equality, the one message that remains loud and clear is the need to get to the polls, and there's no more important election than this year's midterms. Joining us to discuss all of that and more this morning are two individuals representing two groups that are doing more than just talking the talk, but they certainly are on the ground and working to ensure that Black America exercise their voting rights and help turn the tide of a country that leans so heavily in favor of white supremacy. We're happy to have Alicia Garza, the Black Lives Matter co-founder who leads Black Futures Lab, a voter mobilization and advocacy group targeting African Americans, and Krystal Leaphart, the co-lead for Black Girls Vote Advocacy Committee, and of course, Paris Brown of the Baltimore Times. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. So we know the issues, the Supreme Court's abortion rulings, the mass shootings in Buffalo and Texas, and the continued targeting of African Americans by law enforcement. We also know that the Senate has failed to pass things like the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And in the meantime, in most Republican-led states, including Texas and Florida, stiff voter suppression laws have passed and are now law. Let's start with Alicia Garza. Alicia, what is the solution coming from the lens of Black Futures Lab, and how do you expect to accomplish the task at hand?
Well, thank you so much, first of all, for having me on today. I'm so excited to be here with this excellent panel. You know, the first solution here, and probably the only solution to turn the tide of the ongoing and multiple assaults on our rights, is to build independent, progressive Black political power. And that's what we do at the Black Futures Lab. What's it going to take to do that? Well, one of the things that we know we have to do is equip Black voters with the tools that we need to be able to be powerful in these political processes. For example, Black voters are being targeted by misinformation and disinformation every single day about how we participate, whether or not we participate, about the things that we care about. We saw in 2020 that Black voters were getting messages online telling them not to go to the polls, right? Because they might encounter white supremacists. And so countering misinformation and disinformation is deeply important. But the other thing that is deeply important is making sure that our people can get to the polls and challenging laws and policies that keep our people from being able to make decisions over our own lives, whether it be from voter ID laws to other types of voter suppression. Black voters are kept from being powerful in these processes on purpose by policies that the conservative movement has designed, right, to dilute and weaken our power. So those are a couple of the things that we can do to challenge this and to actually build Black political power.
And Alicia, before we go over to Krystal and bring Krystal into the conversation in Paris as well, you guys put together a comprehensive census project that is extremely important. And just remind us why that was so important and why the census was so important. We know that it was cut short by the former president. We know that it was in the middle of COVID when it was done, and it was not complete. But talk about a little bit why that was important and the work you guys have done and still do as it regards to the census.
Well, the Black Census Project is the largest survey of Black people in America in 156 years. And this year, we've kicked off the Black Census Project again to try and reach 200,000 Black people across the country. This would effectively make the Black Census the largest survey of Black people in America, period. And the reason that we're doing this project is because in politics and when it comes to political processes, Black communities are often spoken about, but we're rarely spoken to about the things that we experience every day, the issues that are most important to us, but bigger than that, what it is that we want to see done about it, what we want to see from our government and our elected officials. And with the Black Census Project, what we are doing is designing public policy that works for Black communities. We're also designing mandates for elected officials that are grounded in data that is derived from our communities. We also invest in organizations in our communities to reach far and wide. In the first Black Census Project, we invested over $1 million in Black-led grassroots organizations across the country to be able to get that census into prisons and jails, into migrant Black communities, into Black communities that often get left behind by these types of research endeavors, and therefore their needs and their dreams also get left behind. What's important about this project, though, I will tell you, is that it's an ongoing engagement project that keeps Black people in America engaged in the issues that impact us every single day. When we are doing the Black Census Project, we are actually doing a project of democracy. This is what our elected officials should be doing every year to survey their constituencies and make sure that they are meeting the needs of their constituents. But unfortunately, our democracy is geared towards more corporate interests. We aim to change that, and that's why we're involved with the Black Census Project. If you want to take it, just check out blackcensus.org. It'll be open for a little bit, and you want to make your voice heard.
It's blackcensus.org. Krystal, let's bring Krystal in. Black Girls Vote is a nonpartisan organization designed to represent the concerns and interests of Black women and they're not associated with a political party. But Krystal, what are the biggest concerns you are hearing from Black women and girls, and what has the organization been able to present as solutions? Krystal, I think you're on mute.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you for the warm welcome and introduction and including Black Girls Vote in this conversation. As you mentioned, we really center and focus on the needs of Black women, femmes, and girls as an organization. We register voters, but we also try to equip voters, especially in the ages of 18 to 35, with the full tools to engage in the process. One thing that we see, whether it's issue-based things or just how to get involved in a process in general, is we have to try to get as creative as possible to make sure that those that are at the margins of the margins are fully engaged in the process. Some of the things that we've done briefly, again, that we've done so much in the last couple of years, but briefly, I want to mention 3 things. The first thing is we partner with the National Conference on Citizenship to produce a report around the vote of young Black women specifically. And a lot of them are focused on issues like student loan debt, around reproductive justice issues, and around access to the polls. So we frame our agenda and how we do outreach, especially with younger folks, around those issues. So that's one method. Another method too is during COVID-19, we knew that we would be seeing a gap, if you will, between enthusiasm around voting, which already exists, but we knew it would be expanded in some ways due to access issues and fear around the virus, but also the misinformation piece is very vigilant in that demographic as well. So BGV partnered with different states across the country to produce an idea called Party at the Mailbox. And essentially that was the first voter engagement outreach method where we sent the luxury, if you will, style boxes to young people. Really anybody that signed up to engage them and get them excited about voting, and sending voter engagement information and voter protection information as well. I think too, one thing that my civil rights, if you could call it, background taught me is registration is really one of the first steps in the process. We really have to do a better job at wraparound services for folks that we end up registering. So it's not just registration, but it's also voter education. It's also looking up your sample ballot. So you're voting from the top of the ticket to the bottom of the ballot. It's also getting you to the polls. And it's also making sure that when you get to the polls, your vote is protected and you can actually exercise that vote. And then when you do all that, figure out ways and methods for you to hold your elected officials accountable and engage your elected officials on various issues. Our agenda is very much so a Black women and femme-centered agenda. So we focus on things around violence against women and girls, universal child care, sick leave, health disparities, Black women's equitable pay, Black girls school push out, I mean, all these things that really speak to our demographics. We know that Black women are outvoting just about everybody. We know that we bring our families, our friends, and ourselves to the polls. So why wouldn't we have an agenda that's focused on the needs of Black women, femmes, and girls as well? I think that's going to be a big way to get even more people involved. And that's going to be a way that I think people feel empowered through the process and are fully invested in the process from the beginning to the end.
Yeah, let's bring Paris Brown into the conversation, as well as Dr. Benjamin Chavis, our president and CEO, is here. Paris, we'll start with you before we go to Dr. Chavis. Paris, I know you had some thoughts and questions for our special guest this morning. And I think, Paris, you're on mute.
I want to both thank Krystal as well as Alicia. Had an opportunity to just look at, go through your website. And it's very important, you talk about civic health and being able to educate. Because we had a conversation last week, Stacy, about a woman who did a video, right? And that was misinformed. And we take misinformation to the polls. And so it is very important that there is this holistic approach to our civic engagement, and then exercising our duty as voters. And then I really appreciate what you're doing in terms of the Black Futures. I looked at it, and it's very comprehensive in terms of its reach and really reaching young people. And so I did have one question about that. So we have the young group, right? And then we have this NAACP, we have the I'm going to say, the Urban League. And so is there, what are you doing to bridge the gap between those populations? We have the young, engaged, and I have to say socially responsible adults that are really passionate about the vote and about issues impacting the environment and their right to vote, and Black Lives Matter. But then you do have that older generation, right, that's still there. And how do we, because I think that there's value in bridging that, and would be interested in hearing about how are you engaging the NAACPs, the National Urban Leagues, along with this really progressive, these two progressive organizations.
You want me to start with that? Well, thank you so much for your question. And one of the things that, we've been really paying attention to is very much that gap, right, which we call the 35 to 55-year-old gap, is one that isn't being addressed. And it's one that our organization is very focused on. We love to try in partnership with organizations like the NAACP, like the National Urban League. We've done partnerships with the National Action Network, and those relationships are ongoing. But we also try to be a political home for folks who, they're not they're not millennials, right? They're not young people per se, but they're also a little more. What's the word I'm looking for? They are trying to figure out, right, what kind of institution can really fit their needs. They are open to the ways in which the world is changing and the ways in which our values and we are changing culturally. And also, right, these are folks who may not have time to get to street protests, but they certainly care about the same issues that people are raising in the streets. And so what we try and do to bridge it is actually just be a place where a multitude and a plethora of Black people can see themselves. And we also try to create multiple entry points for action. We know that people are learning as they go. We know that the ways that the world is changing is new for some folks. And so we try to create a place where, as we say, we are creating an environment where there is room for the waking amongst the woke.
Yeah. And Dr. Chavis, I know you wanted to jump in as we go to Krystal with that thought as well, but let's hear from Dr. Chavis for a moment.
Well, I agree with Paris, and I want to just salute Alicia and Krystal for their work. And I think they're particularly their focus on grassroots, on, one of the myths that we need to expose is that all Black people are alike. there's a lot of diversity in the African American community. And I think that to the extent to which we mobilize to get out the vote, we have to take into concert that diversity. It's interesting. We demand that corporate America practices diversity, inclusion, and equity. And then sometimes we don't practice it ourselves within our own community. So I think that groups like the Black Futures and what Krystal's doing with Black Girls Vote, I think is just essential. And I'm glad that Paris asked the question about the other organizations. We need to all work together in sort of a united front. I think we all have a ultimate goal, and the question is working together. And of course, if you read with some of the reports yesterday, the far right wing, they are planting seeds of division. They want us to fight one another over resources. They want us to square off on and become one issue, a constituency. And because we don't agree with that one issue, then we refuse to work together. That's kind of nonsense. But we have to be mindful that people don't want the people who are in power do not want the powerless to ever gain power at the end of the day. And so our struggle for freedom has to always bridge. And I'm so thankful, Stacey, that we're having them on the program, because the Black press, we have an obligation to cover all of our community, not just a segment of our community. And I'm so pleased, and we want to continue this dialogue and follow what the Black Futures Lab is doing, and follow what Black Girls Vote is doing, and continue to work together. We're going to be raising this at our convention in several weeks in New Orleans. We'll have a whole focus on how to get out the vote intergenerationally.
Yeah, and to your point, Edwards Paula is watching and says, thanks for the Black press that tries to keep us well informed. We have to do our part and pay attention. Alicia, while some states have expanded their absentee ballot eligibility and procedures in response to the COVID pandemic, other states have retained strict vote by mail eligibility criteria and requirements for returning a mail-in ballot. This poses unique challenges to Black voters who have been greatly impacted by the COVID pandemic. Tell us what your organization, Black to the Ballot, was able to accomplish in 2020, and what you believe you can accomplish this November.
Well, Black to the Ballot was really an initiative that brought resources to Black-led grassroots organizations to be able to engage civically our communities, making sure that our communities had the information that we needed about what was necessary at the polls, but also making sure that our communities had the information that we needed to make informed decisions about how we were taking civic action. And this year we'll be investing in organizations in 5 states, here in Georgia, in North Carolina, California, Louisiana, and also Wisconsin. Part of what we think is deeply important is that there be increased resourcing and resources to mobilize Black voters, particularly in light of some of the barriers that exist to getting Black voters to the polls, whether that be an enthusiasm gap, right? Because Black voters, by and large, want to see more progress on our political agenda, or whether it be barriers that are erected by policies that want to dilute Black power at the polls. We make sure that our communities and the institutions inside of them have the resources that we need to reach every angle of our community and make sure that we are able to exercise our vote.
Yeah, and Krystal, we know Black Girls Vote remains dedicated to using all your collective voices to transform areas where bias has the most profound impact on the lives of women of color. When you speak with young Black girls, what encouragement are you able to offer, and what's the response? Because I think the response is critical to hear what they have to say.
Yeah, so for us, I think a lot of young people are honestly shocked at the amount of power that we collectively have. I think oftentimes when we do engage young Black girls, We typically do trainings down to middle school and high school level. They're really excited at the thought of voting. They're excited that they can actually participate in the process. And a lot of times it's the first time that they've heard about it. So I think the earlier that we get to people and get them excited about the process and being civically engaged, the better off we'll be in the long term. But I think that they're concerned about some of the same issues we're concerned about. Unfortunately, a lot of the issues that I listed are not reserved for adulthood. They're dealing with reproductive justice issues themselves. They're dealing with Black girls' school pushout in the sense of over criminalization and misread cues and dress codes and all those things. So to hear that the issues that they're dealing with can be dealt with in some ways with the polls, but also talking directly to elected officials and also being an advocate for yourself and your community, they're really excited overall. Again, I think that I wish there was time to get to every school in every state and everywhere really globally to have those conversations. Unfortunately, that's what social studies did for me when I was younger. I don't know if those same programs are around, but I think that there is a gap there. But I also think, to the question prior, I think sometimes there's a overselling or oversell, if you will, of the divide within generations. I know for us, Black Girls Vote, again, engages people as young as middle school, but we have members that are in their 60s and 70s that have been around since the beginning of the organization, and they really anchor and guide a lot of how we engage in the process. I think one thing that we can really do a better job at, and I know we do it here, but I think across the board, is really story sharing. I think there are a lot of just misinformation things, a lot of confusion amongst different folks. And I even model it with my own family, talking to my grandma about her reproductive things and her connecting with, now that I work in RJ fields, menopause is a part of that. I think there's a lot of space to really talk about our own lives and really bridge the gap between generations and how we engage in these issues and in these processes. As far as us, though, and what we're trying to do for the rest of the year, really we're setting out a lot of our midterm priorities. Going into the midterms, the primary in July here in Maryland. We're also just planning a lot of ways to engage around different holidays that are coming up. So accessibility to the polls is a celebration for the 88th anniversary. Talking about Black women's equal pay and student loan debt, just really hitting those issues that are important to people, I think is a model that's worked for us. And I think we're going to keep doing that and expand as much as we can.
Yeah, and Paris, I want to lift up a couple of comments and then I'll throw it to you. Again, Edwards Paula says the far right wing are not the only ones who try to divide us. We have, to be intelligent consumers of information and understand the difference between those who have our best interests at heart and those who want to use us to enhance their own power. And David Youngblood says if we don't participate this time, he's talking about the midterms, there will be little opportunity for next time. Black women will again save this country from itself. Paris, you want to jump in here?
A couple of things. I'm thinking about your outreach efforts, and I'm recalling, I hope I'm not dating myself, the first opportunity I had to vote was when Jesse Jackson ran for president. And I landed at Howard University, and the first thing they did was, and so they encouraged us to vote, to register to vote, right? Because they knew that that election was coming up. So question also for you, how are you reaching? Because that's a great network. Is there a strategy to reach the HBC? Because that's a whole, as freshmen coming in, that's a whole avenue of new votes that you can certainly, we need every vote as possible. Like I mentioned, this is probably the most important vote since Reconstruction.
Yeah, so I failed to mention that I actually grew up in the NAACP. I was in the Detroit Youth Council. I ran Howard's chapter for felt like 30 years. I was on the DC board and all that. So we tap into those youth and college networks. We're actually in the process of creating a more formalized collaboration between the NAACP. But Black Girls Vote also has 5 college chapters for our own HBCU campuses, and we're looking to expand to other campuses as well. So again, a lot of what we do and emphasize is that typical age group within the colleges. So we do work, again, across different states as well, with the Party at the Mailbox initiative that we have, and just general voter engagement. So that's folded into really who we are. A lot of us are HBCU alums. I did attend Howard University, and the model doesn't work without HBCUs. We know that HBCUs are the conscience of most of the places where they are. We know that the freshmen especially are looking to get engaged and are excited and ready to get involved in the process. So Black Girls Vote will continue a tour that we started this year, where we're going to college campuses and partnering with the Black student organizations, even on PWI campuses as well, but really to engage in that vote. We do a high school tour as well, where again, we're investing in our youth before they're even able to vote. So we're registering folks and things like that. So that's pretty much the core of how we've been able to be so successful with registration. We know that that demographic really is typically overlooked. And we didn't want to be a part of that. So we, again, if anybody that wants to register and wants to engage can, but we know that there is just a special emphasis on that category for us.
Yeah, Paris, when you said you didn't want to date yourself and you went back to the Jesse Jackson election, Krystal gave that look. Remember Kevin Hart when someone said their age? She gave that response. She's shaking her head.
No, not like that. It's just it makes me a little emotional. Again, I'm a child of the civil rights movement, so I'm just like, oh my goodness, because my first election was a little bit more recent, but it was still very historic being President Obama and things like that. So I know the connection between, the different parties, if you will, and all that. So it was excitement, I promise.
Yes, absolutely. Alicia and actually, Krystal, this as well, and Doc, this I think is so important. This part, in a nutshell, Alicia, what is the strategy for overcoming potential Black voter apathy?
Well, the strategy is engaging, and it's engaging our communities early and often. Too many political programs will just talk to Black voters for a couple of months. You show up on somebody's doorstep, you flood people's mailboxes with pieces of literature that go directly in the recycling. You might even bring people's phones off the hook until they take them off the hook so that you stop calling. And then you disappear when the election is over. And that's really one of the issues that we have to be paying attention to, and that we pay attention to at the Black Futures Lab. And I know that Black Girls Vote does this as well. Our engagement is year round, and we are engaged in advocacy and organizing in our communities year round. And so there is no gap between, okay, well, we got you to do something and now we need you to do it again. We are bringing people into a long-term program that is helping us exercise political power. The other secret, right, to keeping Black voters engaged and to fighting Black voter apathy, of course, is making sure that the people that Black voters put in positions of power are accountable to Black communities and the things that we need to live well. And I can tell you that one of the things that keeps people, and certainly will keep people this time around from going to the polls, is not seeing progress on the policy agenda that they put people in positions of power to advance. And so while we do our part, and I know that Black Girls Vote does its part, and many other organizations are doing our part to make sure that we don't give up what we started, right? That we finish what we started. Elected officials and politicians need to be aware that when you don't make progress on the issues that your strongest voter constituency cares about, that it could mean that those voters stay home. But, throughout history, we've also seen that it can mean that those voters abandon those vehicles altogether. And so those are some long-term questions that we have to be engaged with as a community. And these are things that folks are talking about at the doors every single day, feeling disillusioned by political parties, feeling disillusioned by the lack of progress in our government, both at the congressional level and statewide and locally. So those are some of the things that we have to contend with in order to make sure that apathy doesn't result in people being put in positions of power that certainly don't have our best interests at heart.
Yeah, I just want to mention that Edwards Paula says he worked the Jesse Jackson campaign. David Youngblood is old enough to remember Julian Bond and Shirley Chisholm, and James Wright of the Washington Informer had his first voting experience when he voted in the election with Mark White for governor of Texas in 1982. Real quick, I don't want to rush you, Krystal, but the same question: how are you, Black Girls Vote, attempting to encourage folks, or not attempting, but encouraging folks against any type of apathy that Black voters may have?
Yes. So, two quick things for us. We really have to do as much as we can, I think, to celebrate our successes as well. I think sometimes the emphasis is always on the things that haven't happened or the things that we're still waiting to change. But we've had a lot of local successes, particularly in the Maryland state legislature. So really getting better at communicating those successes and also crediting people that did vote certain people in to be able to produce those things. And I think people will get more invested and excited in the process. But also, too, I think to your point earlier around voter suppression, we cannot disconnect voter apathy from the suppression piece. If you have to take off work, if you can't find people to take care of your children, if you have to do all these things to engage, or even when you do all that and then you find out you can't vote for whatever reason because of suppression, those things create a constant flow of people that are apathetic about voting or may not see the value in it because they have to do so much to get to it. So I think as we're talking about the individual responsibility, we also need to also keep things at a systematic level and making sure that our processes make it easier for people to vote. Everything from, we talk about literacy tests and things like that, but the Electoral College is a suppression tactic. Having people to register in the first place can be seen as a tactic to get people from disengaging. Purging, all those things, I think, connect to apathy and people really not being invested in the process as possible. We know any business that's operating at 50%, people look at the business. 50% of eligible voters are voting, the other half aren't. So at some point, we need to really look at the larger spectrum of the issue and connect that to why people may not be as invested as well.
Yeah. Well, Black Girls Vote and Black Futures Lab, we are so grateful that you understand and appreciate the Black press and being able to come on this morning. Doc, our convention, the 195th anniversary of the Black Press of America convention is coming up in a couple of weeks. Alicia Garza actually is a Legacy Award recipient, Dr. Chavis, from a couple of years ago. So there's a lot of roots here with Alicia and all the work she's has done in the past and continue to do.
Absolutely.
Doc, I'll throw it to you on that note.
And we want to continue to collaborate with Alicia. I'm so excited about what you're doing with the Black Census Project and all the projects that you informed us. So, look, this is just not a one-time thing. We're going to, I like the idea of being engaged every day, being engaged every month, every week, and not just during election time. I think that's so important because, believe me, a lot of the misinformation that's out there, a lot of the tactics that are used to suppress our vote, they're at it all the time. They even have a war room where they strategize every day about how to keep Black people misinformed, miseducated, and therefore not involved. Mm-hmm. And so, Krystal, I have to give a shout out to HU.
You know,
there it is. I knew that was coming.
And of course, we're gonna have a big celebration, and we invite both Alicia and Krystal to our convention. And I certainly want to. I even want to replay this program this morning at the convention. I thought it was so substantive, and I'm really very proud. And first time I voted was in 1968. I guess I'm telling how old I am.
I was born in 1968.
But the thing is, it's not just for the future of Black people; it's the future of America. Our democracy is at stake, and I hope that we also build some coalitions that even cross the racial divide. We cannot afford to allow the forces of oppression, the forces of repression, to be gaining ground. I think that there's some big challenges, but I'm optimistic. And some of you know I always come on the program to talk about not seeing the glass as half empty, but more than half full in terms of our opportunity and our responsibility to create real change. And our guest today, I just want to thank you. You are creating real change. And I will pledge to you that the Black press will not only continue to cover and promote what you're doing, but we want to collaborate with you so that we all can be more effective in what we do. God bless you and thank you.
Thank you.
Alicia Garza, Black Futures Lab, and Krystal Leaphart, Black Girls Vote. We certainly, again, appreciate you. Paris Brown of the Baltimore Times. Paris she really sacrificed for us this morning. She's not feeling all too well, but we're so glad to have her, always giving her absolute best, 100% best. We thank you so much. And thank you all for joining Let It Be Known. Tomorrow is a very special day for Let It Be Known. This will be our 350th show tomorrow. So join us tomorrow as we bring you more news and information that Black people can use. Have a great afternoon, everyone.